Okay, cool. Sounds good. Okay. All right. It is 6:04. So I am gonna start chatting, and if anyone joins late, we'll just let them in. But welcome. Thank you so much for being here. We're super excited. CMIA is an incredible organization, and we're just really excited to be, hosting this workshop with them. So today we're going to be talking a lot about artist identity and visual branding. Um, we're going to be really exploring how to define, refine, and build a unique artist identity that really resonates with your audience, and make sure that it's not just about the music you make, but how you create an authentic presence across all aspects of your career. I mean, not only your sound, but your visuals, how you show up online, how you connect with fans. And our hope is that by the end, you're going to have actionable steps to better understand who you are as an artist and be able to create a brand that feels true to you. So that is the goal of today. I will let you know. I'm trying to share my screen and talk at the same time, but if at any point the screen stops sharing or doesn't look right with what I'm saying, somebody let me know so that I don't let it get too far behind. But cool. All right, let me go to the next page. All right, cool. So why does artist identity matter? Really, having a clear identity is the secret sauce to standing out as an independent artist, and it's the foundation for everything you do. So not only the foundation for the music you make, but the way you show up on social media, how you design your merch, how you design your website, your brand colors, like what you utilize in music videos, like everything comes back to your artist identity. So if that's not clear from the beginning, artists can get really lost in how they present themselves online, which is never a good thing. So make sure that you have a clear and compelling identity because it is your compass. It guides every aspect and every decision you make. And it's really that defining factor that allows you to differentiate yourself in the industry and make that genuine connection with fans, which, that's where staying authentic is key because it really lets you build a meaningful relationship with your audience. And those are the ones that last. This industry moves really fast. It's really full of trends, but your identity should be the thing that helps you stay grounded and connected and focused on what's really true to you and your core and your anchor as a brand. So yeah, that is why artist identity is so, so important. Talking about setting up your artist identity, there are a few foundations, which this is probably pretty basic to everyone in here, but the three things that are really foundational to your identity, your sound, that's going to be a huge one and probably what most artists start with. And it's just because like that's what comes naturally to you as an artist, right? So your sound is like your unique sonic fingerprint, and it's where everything starts. It's what your audience hears first. Whether that's a specific genre or a mix of influences, it should feel natural and true to you. And that doesn't mean that you can't experiment or stray from sound, in the future. I have a lot of artists ask me, if my sound has historically been, more of a singer-songwriter folk sound, does that mean I can't experiment with other genres? And the answer is no. And we're actually going to talk about this a little later, but evolution is part of your journey, but your sound you should have something rooted in your sound. Like an artist is typically known for their music. So if a listener is coming to your page and listening to your music, they should be able to instantly recognize it as you. So find something that feels really natural, find something that feels really true to you. Don't be afraid to experiment until you find that, and it might take time. It might not be the first thing you make. So just know that that's a really big part of kind of how you present yourself and your artist brand. The next one is your story, and I think this is another kind of like common one that most people recognize as a foundational part, but it's really the part of your identity that connects you to people, which is the most important thing in this industry, connection. It's not just about your music, it's about where you've been, it's about challenges you faced, what you want to express through your songs, and it's really where your audience gets to relate to you, and gets to know you. And this is probably, in my opinion, this is the strongest piece of that artist identity is the story, because it inevitably flows through your music and flows through your visual style and flows through how you're connecting with fans and engaging with them and what you're saying on social media. So That's a really big piece of the foundation that I think is super important. And then the third foundational piece of your artist brand is going to be your visual style. And that's exactly what it sounds like, how you present yourself, essentially. So album covers, think about photos, social media, your fashion, how you present yourself in any possible scenario, how you present yourself in a show, like what do you wear on stage? What do you wear in your social media pictures? Like all of that stuff, you should have some kind of consistent visual aesthetic because it plays a really big role in how people perceive you. So consistency in your visual style makes you easily recognizable and reinforces the vibe that you're going for with the other two elements. So it reinforces that sound vibe. It reinforces your story. So I mean, if you think about it, if you like follow an artist on Instagram and they present themselves a certain way, and then you go to their show and it's completely different, you're going to be instantly thrown off. So that visual consistency is just kind of affirmation of everything else. And a lot of people think that visual branding is, quote, your artist identity, but really, it's just what comes after you've established who you are as an artist and like really gotten down into the core of who you are as an artist. And it just kind of really solidifies that foundational brand that you've built. So yeah, that is visual style. Kind of to figure out why and how you move from these like foundational elements into an artist identity. The first thing I like to ask artists to think about is why they create and defining your core values, because core values is going to really establish those foundational elements, and it's going to help you understand what drives those elements that we just talked about. It's really like the heart of your identity. So you can't understand why you make music with a certain sound until you understand your core values. You can't understand how you present yourself visually until you understand those core values. So everything that we just talked about as being foundational really comes back to being super, super, super clear on your core values. And I've threw a couple of examples up there, things like honesty, freedom, vulnerability, spirituality, like all of that is a common thing. A lot of artists, their core value, we work with a lot of artists whose core value is mental health. So like if that is a thematic element in your songs, like maybe that's the core value. Maybe one of your core values is going through love or breakups or talking about that. So like it can be a lot of things. And this is a really broad question, so it takes time to kind of cipher through. And I have a resource for you at the end that will like really, really dial in on helping you find your core values. But go ahead and be thinking about like, what are the thematic elements that pop up in your music? What are the things that you're talking about on social media? From those things, you can likely pull out your core values if you haven't already. And if you already know, like, this is a core value that I have, that I feel really strongly about this, and this is something I'm going to talk about to my audience, like, go ahead and label that as a core value. A lot of people also use these core values as content buckets. If you've been in the social media world, you might have heard that term. But your core values can also translate to being like your content pillars. So things that you talk about on social media, things that you write about, things you put in your newsletter, that kind of thing. But really, the core value is the heart of your identity. So it's a really important step in figuring out that artist identity. And then while you're thinking about these values, you also want to think about your vision, because your vision is like the big picture. That's the artist you want to become, the legacy you want to leave. It's really about setting that goal for your journey, not just about the music you create, but like the impact that you want to have on the world. So your vision might shift as you grow, and that's totally okay. But having a guiding force that helps you stay true to your essence will be key as you evolve, because inevitably you will evolve, you will change. But if you have these core values and you have this core vision, then you're going to be able to change in tandem with that and still stay authentic and true to like who you were at the beginning, which is really important when you've used that to connect with fans. So yeah, a few questions you can ask yourself. What stories do you feel compelled to tell? Why? What do you hope listeners take from your music? What emotions do you find yourself writing from most often? These questions are kind of the gateway to understanding that deeper purpose behind your art, so they can apply to both your core values and your vision. But this is a really important step to take some time and really explore and think about like what drives your creation in the first place. So you're going to want to kind of continue those questions with other questions like how will this value show up in my music and how will this value influence my interaction with fans? So it's not a quick step. It is one that I would say spend a lot of time on because it sets you up for everything else. And like I said, there's going to be a resource at the end that like helps you really dive into the nitty gritty of those things. But that's the general gist of finding and defining your core values. And then once you've got your core values, the next step is kind of creating that personal mission statement. So when you combine your core values with your vision that we just talked about, you have a foundation for your personal mission statement. And it should be something that's really clear, something that's concise, a reflection of why you create music. You're going to go back and think about those questions we just talked about, like why did you start making music? What do you want your audience to feel when they hear your songs? What's the message or feeling you want to communicate? All of those things kind of go into creating a personal mission statement. And then this personal mission statement is going to be what you refer to for all of the other decisions that you make as an artist. So your fans may not ever see this personal mission statement. That's up to you. If you want to share it, great, but they may not ever see this. This is really for you to use as a tool of understanding the deeper elements behind your creative process and the deeper elements behind everything you do as a brand. And then every time you make a decision, whether that's like a cover art or a merch item or what you're going to wear for a show, like anytime you make a decision, you're going to go back to this personal mission statement and make sure it aligns. And again, like I've already mentioned evolution, when you get to the point where you are evolving with your brand, you're going to go back to that mission statement and make sure that this evolution still aligns with those core things, because that's what really keeps you authentic. So the personal mission statement is really key, something that you should spend a lot of time on. And again, the resource I have for you at the end will walk you through exactly how to set up that personal mission statement. It has a lot more questions than these three, but if you do anything and take anything from this workshop, take these three questions and use that as like a really quick personal mission statement, because those are the broad questions that you definitely need to answer for your artist identity. So we've gotten a good understanding of our core values. We've established kind of the foundation elements of creating an artist identity. We've created our mission statement. Now it's time to put all of that together, put those things into action. So once you've created that mission statement, you're going to want to start honing in on your sound. And again, going back to that mission statement and making sure that it aligns. Chances are you've already done the experiment with sound and genre step. Like I said before, this is usually the first step for most artists. So a lot of times it goes out of order. A lot of times people experiment with sound and genre first, find their style, and then they work backwards. And that's totally okay. But like really hone in on what is your sound and how does that come back to your mission statement? How does that align? And if it's just for you, that's fine. It doesn't have to be something that the fans see, but you need to understand how your sound aligns with that mission statement, how your sound aligns with those core values. If you haven't experimented yet, I would say don't be afraid to try out different sounds and genres until something clicks, and your music will inevitably evolve over time. So the process of experimentation really helps you find a sound that feels authentic. And that is a word you're going to hear me continue to say, because authenticity is the most important part of your brand identity. If it's not authentic, it's not a good brand identity. It really needs to be authentic to you. It needs to be niche to you, and your audience will find you, and you will have a stronger audience for that. So I'm going to keep coming back to that word, but experimentation helps you find that authentic sound for you and make sure that you're not just copying like what's already out there, but that you're finding your signature sound. And then once these two elements are in place, then it's time to start ideating kind of the visual style and the visual aspects of your brand. So building a mood board can be really helpful in that regard, just gathering images and colors and textures, all of those things that help capture the vibe you're going for. You know, anything from like inspo pics of artists that you really like, or text fonts that you really like, or color schemes that you like, anything like that. I highly, highly recommend spending like a week or so and building a mood board that reflects your visual style, because not only will it be a really great tool for you to use when you build a website or make a piece of merch or anything like that, it'll be a really great tool for you to use as you evolve into seeing like how you've evolved, being able to name those things, being able to put a label on them, and then just honing in that visual style to make sure that it complements, again, going back to the mission statement, your music, your message, everything else. Like, does that align? Or when you look at the visual style, does it say something else than what your music says? So I'm trying to think of an example. An example would be like if you were a really punk rock type of musician, like let's say you have like really hard metal music. Let's say some of your core values talk about, I don't know, does anybody have an example? Like talk about, we'll say mental health, or we'll say depression or something like that. Like let's say a more somber content buckets maybe. And then you look at your website and your visual style and it's full of like, let's go super extreme. It's full of like flowers and unicorns and pink and just like doesn't match with the content. That would be such a juxtaposition for the fans. So you like really want to have consistency. Like your visual style should be a visual reflection of the music, just like if you were going to make a music video, right? It wants to be a visual reflection of the music. So I think that's where a mood board can really come into play for that. So yeah, clarify your visual aesthetic, create a consistency in branding. This goes for social media and album art and merchandise. And then the biggest thing after you've done these 3 steps is to take some time to reflect and just keep checking in with your core values. You're going to do this for the rest of your career as an artist. You're going to keep checking in. You're going to see if your music is reflecting what you care about. You're going to see if you feel disconnected. And then if you are, you're going to take a step back and reassess like what really matters. That reflection piece is really important and something that you really should never stop doing. So that is how you kind of put those things into action. I'm going to kind of talk about storytelling, because a lot of that's, in my opinion, the biggest piece of the foundational elements we talked about, is that storytelling part. And it's connecting with authenticity and vulnerability. Your story is the heart of your brand. And it's what makes you relatable. It's what makes your music meaningful. And most of the time, you'll find a lot of these storytelling elements from the core values you created, because usually the story stems from recurring themes in your music or in your lyrics. Like, why are you writing this? And is it because of your personal journey, your struggles, your victories, your dreams, your love affairs? Like, what influenced your music? Most of the time, the story is found in those things. So when you're trying to figure out how to tell your story, go back to those core values and see like, what are these themes, things I talk about in my music a lot, and why do I talk about them, and like make that connection for the fans. And be vulnerable. Vulnerability is really what creates the strongest connection with your audience, because people don't just want to hear your music, they want to understand you as a person. And again, that comes back to the authenticity piece, like sharing your true self, inviting your audience into your world, creating that deeper connection is all about being the first one to be vulnerable and being the first one to be authentic. So this is the step that I really like to stop and have the artist write a 30-second version of their origin story. Obviously, we don't like have a ton of time for that today, but I want you to go ahead and think about key moments that shaped you as an artist. And maybe it's the first song you ever wrote, or maybe it's a pivotal life event, or a moment when you realized you wanted to make music for a living. Anything like that, that will help fans understand like what makes you unique and connect with your journey and help you start to discover the story you have to tell. And you can even think about this from a branding perspective for like think about it outside of the artist world. Think about it for brands and companies. Think about it for the Colorado Music Industry Alliance. Like, their story is that they wanted to create a place for Colorado artists, and music businesses and industry folks to come together and be in community and have educational resources and events and like really network. So that's a huge part of connecting, right, with you guys, is that story of we're a group of artists who wanted to make that happen. My story with Press Fresh Collective, I'm a musician, and I could just, as a musician, see the places where indie artists were underserved in the industry. And a huge piece of that was developmental resources and promotional resources. So I created Press Fresh Collective to fill that gap. Like, you want to ask yourself those questions and share that with your audience. Like, you create music, why? And why should that audience member care about the music you create? So yeah, definitely when this call is over, take a few minutes, write out a quick little origin story. You can come back to this later and go more in depth, but having a quick little 30-second spill or less that you can really use will be great. And you can use that piece of your artist identity in so many marketing tools. It's insane. Like, that is the biggest piece of your artist identity that you will use for marketing to new audiences and new fans. So like, really get a handle on that from the beginning. Okay, now we're going to talk about a kind of a continuation of that storytelling, really, and it's just embracing that authenticity. I've said it probably 50 times already, but it's just so important in sharing your story and connecting with fans and staying true to who you are. So that's really the most powerful thing you can do as an artist, is be authentic. Like, don't try to fit into a box. Don't try to follow the latest trend. Really just be real about your emotions, be real about your struggles, the things that matter to you. It's been proven in so many different ways that when you show up as your true self, your audience can feel it. And music itself is such a relational product. Like, if you think about any product that you purchase out there, I would make the argument that nothing is so relational as music, because music is more experiential. It takes you to a place, it takes you to a feeling, it evokes a memory, it evokes emotion, right, out of the audience. So if you're not showing up as your true self, your audience can feel it. And you want them to trust you, because that trust ultimately builds loyalty. That loyalty ultimately leads to monetization, which ultimately leads to your sustainability as an artist. So the more you allow yourself to be vulnerable and open, the deeper the connection you can build with your fans. And that will be huge to you as you grow in your brand and become sustainable as an artist. So that's really key. Just embrace authenticity in everything that you do. Um, as we kind of go along, you've built your story, you've defined your core values. The biggest thing after you've done all of these beginning steps is finding consistency in your visuals and your sound and your messaging, making sure that everything aligns. It is not just about a cool logo. It's not just about cool visuals. It's not just about a catchy slogan. It's really the whole package. Like, how is everything working together to tell your story? Are your social media posts and your album artwork reflecting the same vibe and message? Are you aligning your visuals and sound with your core values? Like, when you do those things, you build such a stronger and more recognizable brand, and people know exactly what to expect from you. I mean, let's think about some of the biggest artists in the industry right now and how their consistency is across the board. I mean, think about Taylor Swift. Okay, that's like somebody everybody knows. How has she been consistent in her visuals and sound and messaging? Since she was like 15, which is insane, right? She's been consistent in the way she presents herself, the good girl for most of the time, like the girl who was crushed by love or who went through love or anything like that. Like, she really is consistent in how she portrays herself musically, but also visually. You think about other artists like Beyonce, she's been so consistent in her whole career. Um, I don't know, name an artist, and I can point out ways that they've been consistent. Any artist that you follow, they've gotten that success because they've been consistent. And so make sure your content reflects your values, and make sure that it reflects everything you've set up in your mood board and your visuals, and it reflects your music, because if the fans can't make that connection and that cohesiveness and that consistency, they won't be able to follow the story. So again, it kind of goes back to that storytelling. And as you have consistency, the best way to maintain it as you grow and evolve, like we've talked about, is regularly assessing yourself. Have regular self audits. I would suggest doing it every few months, even if you don't feel there's been a big change in your music, even if you feel like it's been the same. It's good to just take a step back, reflect on things, reflect on your music, look at your visuals, look at your brand. Ask yourself, are these decisions that I've made lately staying true to my mission? Are we getting a little off course? How are we getting off course? Is this an evolution or just a small distraction? Like really be self-aware, making sure your message is still aligned with your core values, going through your social media platforms, analyzing the content, making sure that the content of what you're posting is in alignment with the brand that you establish. I think social media is the easiest place to get off track, mostly because you're doing it the most often. You're doing it super consistently. So, if you start to notice yourself getting off track in social media, you can kind of right the ship before it gets too far. But just have an ongoing self-reflection to help you stay authentic while you evolve. Because again, you're going to evolve. That is inevitable as a musician. So you just want to make sure that while you're evolving, you're staying authentic to who you are and who you set your brand up to be. And it's also just super important to self-assess when you're making creative decisions. So especially, I would say visual decisions. So whether that's designing, like I'm going to go back to cover art, whether that's designing a piece of cover art for your song, design that cover art and then ask yourself those questions. Is this aligned? Does this look like the rest of my visual content? Can I see a thread stringing this to my other content? Like have that self-awareness as part of your creative decisions. And a lot of questions I get about that evolution, which I guess might be relevant on this next slide, but a lot of questions I get about that evolution is like, what if I have a thematic album that, is a little different from my usual? I would make the argument that even if you have a thematic album, that it would still have a thread of your main messaging and your core identity in it. Like if you think about Beyonce, who just dropped her country album, right? She's not known as a country artist. She dropped a country album. There is nothing that I would look at in her website, in her cover art for the album, in her music videos, anything like that, that would make me think, oh, this isn't Beyonce. Like there's a clear thread of who she is as an artist and as a person in this new kind of era of her country album. Taylor Swift does the same thing all the time. She has different eras, right, for her music. Well, each era has the core Taylor Swift in it. Like you wouldn't look at that era and be like, this feels really off for Taylor. No, like it looks like Taylor. It sounds like Taylor. It just tells a different chapter of her life. Like she's done a really good job of evolving, but still maintaining her identity and staying grounded in her core messaging. And I guarantee you she did that through having core values and kind of a core authentic brand identity from the beginning. Post Malone, he just did the same thing, right? He launched a country album. Even when I look at his stuff on socials and I look at the music video and everything, it's still Post Malone to me, right? So it's like have room for that flexibility, have room for evolving your identity, have room for having an era of your own or a thematic album of your own, but make sure that when you're doing that, you're not going so far off base that your audience doesn't recognize you anymore, because that's where it gets really dicey. But yeah, growth is natural and it's going to happen. So just as you experiment, ask yourself, does this reflect who I am? If not, like, how can I make it reflect? How can I pull that thread from my core brand? And how can I make this feel like me to my audience, even though I'm trying something new? So evolution can really enhance your brand as long as you stay grounded in core values. Yeah, we kind of flew through that. I'm sorry, I talk fast when I get nervous, but I wanted to open it up for a Q&A. This is really like the biggest part of the workshop to me. I want to make sure we answer your questions and maybe even take examples, like look at some of your guys's artist brands and kind of dissect them and talk about like actionable ways. I want this to be a hands-on experience. So I'm going to open it up for a Q&A. And if you want to share your artist brand, like that would be awesome. I can switch it over to let you share your screen. But yeah, is there anyone in here that's got an immediate question about what we just talked about as far as like an overview of artist identity and what it is and the components and all of that good stuff? Does anyone want to share their um, initial thoughts on like what they think their artist identity is or like the work they've done to create their artist identity up to this point?
I was just gonna ask you how you feel about artists who change their brands, or they play with different fonts or colors, but the
Mm-hmm.
storytelling aspect is consistent.
That's a great question. I would say if I would say I wouldn't do it too often. So I wouldn't be doing it like every week or every month, like I would make it a really intentional choice to change that. I think there is definitely room to change things like font and colors if your storytelling is consistent, because I think that can also go back to like what we were just talking about with thematic time periods in your brand, right? So like I actually have a lot of artists who I've worked with in the past who have done different color schemes for different albums. So when you go look at their, which I think is a cool concept, when you go look at their Spotify or their social media, like there'll be a whole section that's like in red. And that red symbolizes this album. And then there's a whole section that's in yellow, and that symbolizes this album. We actually did a really cool campaign last year with an artist who did that. And I thought it was really genius because like his music videos would be black and white all the time. That was part of his, core identity visually as an artist. But every album he did had a different color associated. So, like, even though his music video is black and white, there would be like a pop of red when he was doing a video for this album. It might be like a red car or red sunglasses or like whatever. But that was part of his identity. So, I would say the changing of color, like he established that was part of his identity from the beginning. I think if you're just doing it willy-nilly, it can, I want to use the word cheapen, but like maybe that's not the best word, but it can kind of cheapen that a little bit. So I would say like do it intentionally if you're gonna change it. Like if you've gotten to a place and you just don't feel like the color scheme is you anymore, that's part of that evolution. Go ahead and change it and make it part of your story and like talk about it and say like this is the era I've moved into, but then don't change it again next week, if that makes sense.
Definitely makes sense.
Yeah. Um, Sweet. Any other questions?
I have lots of questions. I was just waiting to not be the only person.
Don't be scared to be the only person.
No, I'm usually like the first person, and so I'm trying better to like sit on my hands for a little bit and like
No, don't do that. Be the first. Be the first in every room.
okay. Listen, it's the cross I bear. It's my daily I do. So, first of all, Don, thank you so much for this. This has been really informative and very helpful. My name is El Shaddai, and I am an artist as well. And I am still very early, like in my artist development. And so, I guess like a question that I have for you is like, for someone who's like literally starting out, going from, like working on voice and vocals and just mastering the craft to now
Mhm.
transferring into like trying to become a full artist and the branding and the business side of that, like what are the first few steps you think, aside from like everything you went through in your
Yeah.
like, but like how to put it together in a way that's like a tangible step to kind of like move the ball forward, like from that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm glad you're at the beginning of that process, and that you're thinking about artist identity like while you're still finding your sound. Because
Mhm.
I think I said this earlier, but I feel like a lot of people do it backwards, where they make some music and then they maybe put it out and they start doing things online and then they're like, oh wait, what's my brand? And then it's a lot
Right.
harder to kind of like backpedal. So I'm glad you're doing it at the beginning. I think that's gonna just help you so much as you go forward. I would start with looking at, so look at the music you create, right? Because that's inevitably, as artists, that's at the root of everything we do. So look at that music that you've already been kind of creating and experimenting with. If there is a lot of experimentation happening, then I would say see if you can pick out a few like themes or sounds or vibes that maybe thread through all of that that's still happening and hone in. Like if you're doing a certain vibe or you have a certain sound in your vocals or you're using certain instrumentation in all of the songs, even though you're still widely experimenting, like you can start to see what you use the most of and say like, okay, this must be a piece of my sound because I'm using it in every song, even though I'm experimenting with all the other things. So I would say like start looking for those common elements. Same thing lyrically. Like, what are you talking about in your lyrics? Are they kind of revolving around the same theme or the same couple of themes? I would look at that and then use those things to define those core values we talked about and build
Mhm.
upon that. There's a whole worksheet I'm going to share with you when we're done with the Q&A that I think is going to be perfect for you because it really like it asks you very specific questions to make you think about these things in other ways. So yeah, I would say like go through that worksheet and like think about things, really ponder things. Don't just do it in a night, like sit on it for a week or two, and like really think about like all of those different elements. But I think for where you're at, like looking at the music and like what are some common things that you're doing and can you find a thread of commonality even though you're still experimenting? And then the great thing is like you haven't established a visual brand yet. So once you find those threads of commonality, you can kind of start to incorporate that visually, and making sure that that's really aligned as well. So did that help or create
Yeah.
more questions?
No. That's really cool actually, because I think what I was thinking about when I heard you talk was like how just being a creative person, like maybe there's colors or filters or
Yeah.
like, ideas, fonts, like visual things that I naturally already gravitate to whenever
Yes.
I share content in the world. And so it's like it's kind of already there, just a matter of like picking it out and then
100%.
automating it. And then
Yeah.
like also like with sonically, it's interesting like sometimes the type of artist we want to be, quote unquote,
Mm.
might be
Yes.
different than what our music is actually saying. And maybe that's a sign to like do something different and don't just make your identity based on what you think you want to,
And yeah.
you know what I mean? So
Go.
maybe
Yeah. I was about to say, I'm so glad you said that because I see that as such a common thing when I work with artists who don't have a clear vision on who they are, that
Mhm.
is 9 times out of 10 like the culprit. Like they make a certain type of music, but they want to be a different type of artist. And there's like no consistency and no congruency. So I think you just hit the nail on the head. Like, and I think that goes back to being authentic, right? Like most people want to be a certain type of artist because they've seen someone else do it. And typically that does not serve you well. Like
Right.
if you're emulate, like you want that authenticity, the saying is there's riches in the niches, right? So you like want to have your niche and your core audience that really connect to who you are. So that's key. And then like what you were saying about finding things you already gravitate to, that's literally what it's all about. Is like just analyze. It's really self-analyzing. Like analyzing what are you gravitating to sonically? What are you gravitating to lyrically? When you create your mood board, like just take Pinterest and like put a bunch of things that you like and then go back and look at it and say, what can I pick out from this mood board that like is a common theme that I'm seeing? Like you don't have to create that mood board from the beginning with a specific visual in mind. And I would actually encourage you not to. I would encourage you to like just go to Pinterest or Google or like wherever you like to search for things.
Mhm.
And
Just do things you like, just
yeah,
naturally,
just pull
whatever.
everything you like in there. Some of
Okay.
it might not even relate to music or branding, like it might be
Mm.
a picture of a girl at a pool. Like who knows? Like it could be
Mhm.
anything. And then after you've done that for like a week or two, go back and look at everything you pulled in there and be like, what is a common thread between these things? Is it a vibe? Do I gravitate towards certain colors? Do I gravitate towards this vibe of like people having fun or this vibe of whatever. Yeah, like that's the whole point, really, is like just self-analyzing and finding what you already have as a person and like as a creative, and just finding the common themes and then packaging those so that you're aware, so that when you go forward and making stuff, you can like make things more intentionally that will draw on those things and be more effective when you leverage it for marketing and when you leverage it for fans and everything else. So yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
So when we have that Pinterest board and we're looking at it, what does that look like when we start to implement that into those different areas that you're talking about? Like how can we start doing that?
Yeah. I think it could look a few different ways. I think visually that's going to be the obvious one, right? Like, can you find certain color schemes that you like, implement that visually into your brand as like a color palette for a website, a color palette that you kind of lean to for cover art. Are you finding a certain vibe? Like some artists really like kind of like the hazy, distorted photos and whatever. So like that's going to be implemented visually through your social media posts and like how you present yourself online with cover. Again, I'm going to go back to cover art a lot because it's a big part. But like, again, how you do your cover art or how you do your music videos or things like that. You might also see through creating a Pinterest board, like some of those core values come into play. I think that could be a little harder just because typically core values are a little deeper and they're more about like the content that you're presenting, whereas Pinterest is such a visual platform that it's going to really lend itself more to that visual aspect of your brand. But like kind of like I mentioned with like the punk rock example, like you want to make sure that what's on your Pinterest board reflects the vibe of who you are as a person, the vibe of your music and things like that. So like if you're finding on your Pinterest board, well, what kind of music do you make? Tell me that first.
It's still kind of developing, but it's like a cross between like soulful, like
Mhm.
lyric music, R&B kind of heavy, but also like influences of like my Ethiopian heritage, like jazz,
That's
and
cool.
also like
Yeah.
reggae at the same time. So it's a little bit of
So
both.
your artist identity is going to be super unique.
Yeah, right.
But like I would say like if you're pinning a bunch of like all black um death metal, really harsh text, things like that, I would say that wouldn't align with
Right.
who you are, right? Like that doesn't mean it's
Right.
you. So like making sure that like if someone who listens to your music goes to your website, they're not going to be totally surprised by what they see. Like it should look like what it sounds like. So take my brand, for example, like Press Fresh Collective. Our colors are like pink and oranges and yellows, lots of pink. When you encounter me on social media, I'm usually talking like this. I think like overall our team is like bubbly and like obviously very energetic. We talk fast, like all that good stuff. So if you went to my website and you saw a really just like boring website that was like black and gray and didn't have a lot of personality infused, it wouldn't match like the personality the brand has. So, I mean, think about that as an artist too. Like, just make sure it matches the personality you have in your music. If your music is more upbeat and lively and energetic, you want your visuals to match that. You might use more bright colors. You might use like a more experimental, like funky font. If your music is more like in the soulful, maybe a little more somber, ballady type of stuff, you might have a toned down color palette. You might have images that you have like of yourself and of your art. That's going to be really key in determining like your visual presence, because if your images are showing you again in like bright colored clothing or like really upbeat, or your music videos are like you bopping all around town, like that's going to lend itself to a more upbeat, vibrant brand. Whereas if your music videos are more ballady, somber, it's like you singing into a microphone, they're more serious, like I would say tone down the color palette a little and like help your visuals match that. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. This is super helpful.
Yeah, it's really just about like doing all of the steps and taking time to do them. Don't rush them. Like, don't do them all in one night. Like I said, take a couple weeks and do this. And then once you've done all the steps, go back and do the self-analyzing part and see like what's the common theme. And that's going to be your artist identity. And then there's going to be things that like you maybe have in your mood board or you have in your music or whatever that don't fit the box that you create for yourself. But that's okay because you can have these like outlying elements and you can have these outlying things that come up. The core is what's important. So like, you know, let's say you have let's say most of your catalog is like upbeat or whatever, but then you put out a really somber ballad. Like that's not a big deal. It doesn't mean that it doesn't fit your brand, right? It just means that like you're experimenting and how can you still reflect your brand in that? Is it through the visuals? Is it through the clothing choices? Is it through the font choice on the cover art? Like there's still room for that, if that makes sense. But yeah, this analyzing is like where all of that kind of comes together, I think.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I'll definitely connect with you online too. And
Yeah, do that. That would be fun.
thanks.
I'm glad you covered that because I was just about to ask, what do you think about artists who have like a certain niche, but
Yeah.
one day they feel like they want to experiment, and now they feel like they have to like go under a different moniker to be able to release a song
Yeah.
that's outside of their genre. Like,
Yeah. I don't really ever think there's a dire need for that, to be honest. Like, if I think the only time that's needed is if you really want to have a creative departure and you want it to be a permanent creative departure, you know?
mm-hmm.
Um, like immediately what comes to my mind is like Sturgill Simpson and Johnny Blue Skies, his alter ego, you know? Like, I don't know if anybody follows him, but like he wanted that creative departure, so he created a whole alter ego, right? And then ultimately now the whole thing is Johnny Blue Skies is dead and he's back to being Sturgill Simpson. So it's like the whole thing. I kind of think like unless you're looking for a really hard creative departure that you want to be a permanent thing, I think there's room to experiment and evolve and try different things in your current brand. Beyonce, Post Malone, those examples are prime examples, right? Like she took a total departure into country, but her music still sounds like Beyonce. It's not a country album, it's a Beyonce album. Like how many times did we hear that when that was coming out, right? Like there were still those thematic elements, even though it was a country album, like you could still hear Beyonce's influence in it, which was really cool. It's still in her music videos. Like you instantly recognize it as a Beyonce video and her visuals and her posters, like all of that still goes back to her core brand, but she took a total musical departure. Post Malone did the same thing. I would maybe even argue his departure was more than the Beyonce departure because he like really dove into the country sound. Um, if somebody was listening to him for the first time, they would probably never know he was in any other genre, right?
Oh
So like
yeah, he did a whole creative departure. Beyonce was just visiting for a little bit.
yeah, like Post Malone did a whole creative departure. But then when you get to know him as an artist and you're following him on social media or whatever, it's still Post Malone and it's still who you signed up to follow. And it's still like the artist that you initially fell in love with. He just did something different creatively for a bit, you know? So like
True.
I think there's room for that if you're just really intentional. And I think again, like that comes back to that self-awareness and being really intentional about what you're doing and not just like diving off the deep end and not thinking about how it ties back into who you are as an artist.
Yeah. I kind of like when people go to I don't know, have those creative departures because I feel like it moves them towards their most authentic self. Like Taylor
Yeah.
Swift went from making Christian music. I don't know if anyone even knows that. She was
Yeah.
a Christian song like singer songwriter, and then she went to country. Now she's in pop.
Yeah. Like total evolution, right? There's a honestly there's a lot, I won't say most, but there's a lot of artists out there that do that, but they still stay true to who they are as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And I
And
agree. That's part of that evolution, which I love.
Taylor Swift probably wanted to make pop when she was doing Christian music.
Probably. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy to see. But yeah, that's a really good point. It just goes back to that self-awareness. So yes. El Shaddai, did I say your name right? I'm sorry if I didn't, but you raised your hand. You want to jump in with a question?
Yeah, you did say it right. Thank
Okay.
you.
Good.
I was just gonna say, like, I love that you use Taylor Swift and Beyonce as an example, just because I feel like there's such strong brands to like dissect. I'm just
Mhm.
curious, like these principles of like artist identity, are these like pretty like tried and true like industry standards? Because like when I think of like a Beyonce, for example, like one theme that she's really strong into is like female empowerment. Like I think
Core
about,
value. Yes.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so even when you say like sit with it and don't just like willy-nilly this, it's like because you
Mhm.
kind of have to go deep. Because if that's how she was feeling at 19 in Destiny's Child, and that was a theme that they started with, and she's still, being
Still
a
wrong.
still kind of exuding that, then it's not something that's like changing. This is like fundamental, like who are you as a human? Because you're not gonna,
100%. Yeah. That's
yeah, that's interesting.
who are you as a person? How does that come out in your music and
Right.
how you present yourself? And I would actually, that's a really great exercise that I would say like pick maybe your favorite mainstream artist and dissect everything they've done in their career and like see if you can find their core values and their foundational elements that we talked about. Like, can you find their core values? Can you find like the signatures of their sound? Can you find the signatures of their visual style? Like, that's a great kind of working, like workshop thing to do for yourself to see if you can find it in other artists. Because if you can find it in those artists who have arguably done it the best of the best, then
Mhm.
it'll be easier for you to pinpoint that in yourself, I think,
I'm
when
about to
you're,
start doing that. I'm about to start
yeah.
doing
It's
that.
it's a really great tool to do. And even like the worksheet I'm gonna give you, like even use it as a guide and walk through like Beyonce and be like,
Okay.
okay, let me ask this question as if I were Beyonce and like see
Right.
if you can answer it. Cause I think that'll open your eyes to like what some of these elements are. I think a lot of artists like struggle with figuring out like what are the things they should be thinking about in terms of artist identity and like pinpointing their core values. That's a really hard one for a lot of people, is pinpointing those core values. But like the female empowerment, that's a prime example. That has to be one of her core values, right? Because she's carried it through every stage of her career and it's evident in everything she does. So like ask yourself like what's evident in everything I'm doing and what are those topics and what are those content pillars? But
Cool.
yeah, that's a great experiment to do.
Thanks. And are you going to be emailing the sheet that you're talking about to us? Is that how it's going to happen?
You'll be able to download it. So
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, we can jump over to that if you guys want to go ahead. If there's any other questions, I'll definitely take those. But can you guys still see my screen? I'm not sure. Um,
Yeah.
Here is the guide. If you go to the link I have up there, pressfreshcollective.com/shop, and you put in the code CMIA _ attendee, all caps, you can download it for free. That code does expire next week, so like do it, I would say now, so you don't forget. But yeah, I think it'll be a really helpful tool. It is a really in-depth 38-page guide on building your artist identity. So it's really more like a workbook. It walks you through all of the steps we talked about in much deeper detail. Basically, what we did today was kind of a broad overview because artist identity is really a nitty-gritty thing. So it was like impossible to do everything in super deep detail within an hour. But yeah, this will walk you through it in much deeper detail. There's a ton of questions, there's a ton of thought exercises. Like I said, it's very much like a workbook that you go through, and yes, you read some, but you also like are very much interacting and kind of developing your artist brand. So the hope is that by the end of it, you will have a really solid understanding of who you are as an artist, as a person. You'll have a clear direction for your visual branding, all that good stuff. So yeah, you can hit up the website, use that code. You'll be able to download it for free. And then while you're on our website, sign up for our Indie Artist Toolkit newsletter too, because that's going to have, we send out stuff every other week. That's just like, kind of like this, helping artists develop and marketing strategies and all that good stuff.
This is
So
really dope. This is really dope, Don. Like, thank you so
thanks.
much for coming on here and
Yeah,
doing this class. I was a student today too. I learned a lot. So
good. I
it was
love
cool.
it.
So you're could you let everyone know that you're a publicist like out
Oh
here?
yeah. Yeah, so I live in yeah, where I'm in Colorado too. I live in Durango, but I frequent the Front Range. And yeah, I'm a publicist. We have a team that does publicity. We do other types of promotion too. We like to call ourselves a one-stop a la carte label shop. Ha ha ha. But basically we have like all the services a label has promotionally and developmentally, but a la carte for artists. So PR is a really big component of what we do. Playlisting, marketing, meta ads, like all of that good stuff. Social media strategy, distribution is something we have in-house. Like all of those things are things we can support artists on, and we just kind of meet with you one-on-one and talk about like where you're at in your career and what are your pain points and what do you need help with, and customize something for you. So yeah, if you want to find out more, go to our website and like look around. There's a lot of info there. Sign up for our newsletter. Like that's the best free resource. And then we've got a YouTube channel and a blog and all that good stuff. But the newsletter will get you where you need to go.
Most Def, thank you. And if anybody wants to contact you, they can use that email right there.
Yes, and I was also gonna say, if you download the guide and you're walking through it and you have questions, or you just like want some feedback on like what you've put together, like hit me up in the email and I'm happy to help and offer my feedback and just kind of help you navigate discovering your artist identity. Cool.
Most definitely. Thank you. For real.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank everybody for coming through and taking the time to learn a little bit. It's important.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. This was a lot of fun. And we're going to be having more workshops, so keep your eye on the CMIA newsletter too, because we're going to be announcing those soon. So cool. All right. Well, I am going to end the chat unless there are any last minute questions, but thank you all for being here and we'll see you next time.
Most Def, thank you. Good night.
Good night.